Imagine spending your entire life savings to establish a certified organic family farm. Only to wake up one morning and find your billionaire neighbor has erected a massive, 15-foot industrial steel fence directly on your boundary line. No natural cross breeze. No morning sunlight for your crops. And a toxic coating of chemical sealant dripping straight onto your soil. This isn't a standard security barrier for a commercial warehouse. This is the deliberate work of a ruthless chemical manufacturing tycoon named Piers Sterling. A man who honestly believed that his enormous corporate wealth gave him the right to poison his neighbors and redraw the federal environmental maps whenever he pleased. He built this towering, million-dollar fence out of pure, calculated malice. Solely to contaminate his neighbors' award-winning soil and force them into financial ruin so he could seize the land for his industrial expansion. But Piers made one catastrophic, irreversible blunder in his master plan. In his absolute arrogance to seal off the border, his engineering team dug their deep structural footings directly through a legally protected federal water table and an international migratory wildlife corridor. And by the time the United States Department of Justice and the federal judges delivered their final, crushing verdict, that arrogant tycoon didn't just see his million-dollar fence torn down panel by panel. The federal lawsuit triggered an immediate shutdown of his entire corporate operation, bankrupting his global chemical company and leaving him completely ruined. Here is how a billionaire's ultimate act of corporate warfare backfired so spectacularly, it resulted in the total destruction of his own empire. The story takes place in the fertile, sun-drenched valley of Green Valley County. For nearly 22 years, Elena Rostova, a 55-year-old former agricultural scientist and widowed mother, lived a quiet life running a highly successful, certified organic berry farm that had been featured in national agricultural magazines. Elena didn't care about corporate politics, high profit margins, or showing off. She cared about the purity of her soil, the health of her community, and the pristine natural stream that ran along the western border of her property. But in 2025, a massive corporate shadow fell over Green Valley in the form of Piers Sterling. Piers was the cutthroat billionaire CEO of Sterling Biochem International, a global conglomerate that manufactured industrial pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and synthetic polymers. His latest massive project? The Omega Complex. A sprawling, multi-million-dollar chemical processing plant situated on a massive 500-acre industrial plot right next to Elena's pristine organic farm. There was only one major obstacle standing in the way of Piers's grand industrial vision. Elena's certified organic farm sat directly upstream from his planned chemical waste storage tanks. Under federal environmental regulations, Piers could not expand his heavy manufacturing zones within 500 feet of a certified organic agricultural property due to the severe risk of airborne and subterranean chemical runoff. Piers didn't care about environmental laws or human health. He sent a team of high-powered corporate lawyers to Elena's house with an aggressive, intimidating contract, offering her a lowball price of $500,000 for her entire 50-acre farm, which was barely a quarter of its true value. When Elena politely but firmly refused, Piers personally pulled up to her driveway in a sleek, armored luxury SUV, rolled down his window, and arrogantly told her, "Look at the big picture, Elena. My facility is $100 million state priority. Your little organic berry bushes are standing in the way of global supply chains. Take the money and retire, because one way or another, I am expanding my borders." But Elena, looking him straight in the eye with the calm, immovable confidence of a scientist who knew the law, completely refused to be bullied. "This soil is completely chemical-free, and it has taken me 2 decades to achieve this level of biopurity, Mr. Sterling. The federal government protects organic farmlands from industrial encroachment, and I will not sell my family's legacy to a chemical plant. My land is absolutely not for sale." Piers Sterling was a textbook IKY who viewed any form of resistance from ordinary citizens as an insult to his corporate authority. To his greedy mind, every person had a price, and anyone who refused to comply was just a bug to be completely squashed under his boot. He glared at Elena, smirked maliciously, and snarled, "You think the federal government will protect you from me? I write the checks that fund the local regulatory boards. Enjoy your clean dirt while it lasts, because I am going to build a border that will ruin you." And Pierce was a man of his word. 3 days later, at exactly 5 a.m. on a Monday morning, Elena was startled awake by the deep, thunderous vibration of heavy industrial drilling machinery right outside her window. She rushed out to her western border and was absolutely horrified by what she witnessed. An army of commercial construction workers, backed by heavy flatbed trucks and massive concrete mixers, was actively digging a massive, 6-foot-deep trench directly along the entirety of Elena's property line. They were installing giant, heavy industrial steel I-beams deep into the earth. When Elena furiously demanded that the site foreman show her a building permit, Pierce Sterling stepped out of a temporary mobile command trailer, holding a digital tablet with a smug grin. "Everything is fully permitted by the county zoning board, Elena," Pierce laughed arrogantly over the roar of the engines. "This is a specialized, high-security industrial privacy barrier. It costs a cool $1 million to build, and it is going up today." Elena immediately called the local police and the county code enforcement office. But when Pierce's corporate lawyers presented a stack of newly approved county variances and emergency industrial security permits, the local officials claimed they had no jurisdiction to stop the work. Pierce's construction crews intentionally operated heavy, smoke-belching diesel cranes right against the fence line, blowing thick black carbon exhaust directly over Elena's organic berry fields, ruining thousands of dollars worth of ready-to-harvest crops in a single afternoon. But the true, sickening height of Pierce's corporate malice was unleashed over the next 2 weeks. To completely break Elena's financial back and force her to abandon the farm, Pierce ordered his engineers to coat the massive, 15-foot-tall steel panels of the fence with a highly toxic, industrial-grade chemical waterproof sealant. The fence was completed, completely blocking out the crucial morning sunlight and stopping the natural mountain breeze from circulating through Elena's fields, throwing her organic crops into a permanent, damp, and freezing shadow. Even worse, every single time it rained, the water would hit the massive steel wall and run directly down into Elena's soil, carrying a highly toxic, oily film of chemical sealant runoff straight into her certified organic root systems. Within weeks, Elena's high-definition agricultural soil sensors began flashing red, showing a massive spike in synthetic chemical pollutants. Her organic certification was instantly suspended by the agricultural inspectors, completely destroying her business and blocking her from selling her crops to her high-end grocery distributors. Pierce actually stood on a raised industrial viewing deck on his side of the barrier, shouting down at her through a megaphone, "How is the organic business doing, Elena? My offer just dropped to $200,000. Call my office before you go completely bankrupt." Pierce felt absolutely untouchable. He believed that an independent female farmer would quickly run out of money trying to fight a multi-million-dollar corporation in a prolonged legal battle. But Pierce made one fatal, catastrophic mistake. He completely forgot that Elena Rostova was a highly trained former agricultural scientist who specialized in soil hydrology and environmental law. Instead of giving up and crying, Elena spent every single night in her lab, meticulously testing her soil, tracking the chemical composition of the runoff from the steel wall, and mapping the deep underground water currents using advanced geological software. She didn't just look at her own local land deeds. She discovered that to dig the massive, 6-foot-deep concrete foundations for that heavy steel fence, Pierce's construction crew had cut directly through a major subterranean aquifer that fed a federally protected wetland reserve 3 miles away. Even more scandalous, she documented that the fence completely blocked a historic, internationally recognized overland migration pathway for an endangered species of mountain deer. Pierce had bypassed the local county boards with bribes, but he had completely violated strict, unyielding federal environmental protection laws. Elena immediately contacted Marcus Vance, a legendary, fiercely aggressive federal environmental litigator known for winning massive landmark cases against multi-billion-dollar corporate polluters. When Marcus saw the hard chemical data, the soil sensor logs, and the underground water maps Elena had prepared, a cold smile spread across his face. "Elena," he said, "Pierce Sterling didn't just build an illegal spike fence. He just committed a major federal environmental crime on camera. We are taking this straight to the federal district court." Instead of filing a petty local property claim, Marcus Vance bypassed the corrupt county court entirely and filed a massive, multi-million-dollar emergency federal lawsuit directly with the United States District Court and the Environmental Protection Agency, charging Sterling Biochem International with civil fraud, intentional toxic contamination, and severe violations of the Federal Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act. When the federal marshals delivered the emergency summons directly to Pierce's executive high-rise penthouse, the billionaire laughed out loud. He told his board of directors, "This is a joke. We will tie them up in federal motions for the next 10 years. By then, the old woman will be completely broke and gone." But Pierce's supreme arrogance was completely shattered on the very first day of the federal injunction hearing. Pierce walked into the prestigious federal courtroom wearing a luxury tailored suit, flanked by a massive team of 8 top-tier corporate defense attorneys. He sat down at the table, completely oozing confidence. The federal district judge, a famously strict and fiercely independent legal legend named Judge Margaret Stone, slammed her gavel down with absolute authority and called the court to order. Elena's attorney, Marcus Vance, stood up calmly, walked over to the podium, and pulled up a massive digital display of Elena's scientific soil logs and subterranean water maps directly onto the courtroom screens. "Your Honor," Marcus's voice boomed through the silent courtroom. "The defendant, Pierce Sterling, knowingly, intentionally, and maliciously constructed a $1 million, 15-foot steel spike fence. Not for security, but as an act of corporate chemical warfare to intentionally contaminate my client's certified organic soil and force her into bankruptcy. And as you can see from this real-time chemical spectrometer data, the toxic sealant used on that fence has actively poisoned the local soil. But the corruption goes much deeper, Your Honor." Pierce's lead defense attorney jumped up confidently, "Your Honor, this is a local zoning matter. The county fully approved the industrial security barrier variance. A civil court cannot halt a major industrial facility over local soil runoff." Judge Margaret Stone leaned forward, her eyes narrowing into cold slits as she stared down at the corporate defense team. "Sit down, counselor." Judge Stone thundered, her voice echoing like a crack of thunder. "You are in a United States federal court now, and county variances mean absolutely nothing here. Miss Jenkins, show the court the hydrological data." Marcus Vance flipped to the next digital slide, showing a 3D mapping of the underground aquifer beneath the steel fence. "Your Honor," Marcus continued, "to pour the massive concrete footings for this $1 million fence, the defendant's crews dug deep into the bedrock and intentionally punctured the Green Valley aquifer. This illegal excavation has diverted toxic chemical waste from their plant directly into a federally protected wetland reserve. Furthermore, we have submitted satellite tracking data proving that this fence has completely blocked a mandatory federal migratory wildlife corridor, which is a direct, explicit violation of the Endangered Species Act. The defendant lied on his federal EPA disclosure forms to rush this project through." The courtroom went completely chaotic as 2 federal prosecutors from the Department of Justice stepped forward, handing a stack of criminal search warrants directly to Pierce's lead attorney. Judge Margaret Stone slammed her gavel down with a force that shook the wooden bench. "Donald Sterling, look at me," the judge boomed, pointing an absolute finger at the trembling billionaire. "You utilized your immense wealth to deliberately poison a citizen's land and lie to federal regulators. You believed your corporate checkbook made you completely immune to the laws of this country. You were dead wrong." The final federal court order was an absolute, unprecedented corporate execution. First, the federal judge issued an immediate, non-appealable emergency injunction ordering the total and absolute demolition of the entire 15-foot steel fence within 72 hours. handled by a federal engineering crew at Pierce's direct personal expense. Second, under the strict penal guidelines of the Federal Clean Water Act, the court ordered an immediate total freeze on all construction and manufacturing operations at the Omega Complex, completely shutting down the entire $100 million plant indefinitely. Third, for the intentional, malicious chemical contamination of Elena's business, the court awarded Elena a staggering $3 million in punitive and compensatory damages. Pierce Sterling sat completely frozen at the defense table, his face completely white, his hands shaking uncontrollably as his entire multi-million-dollar industrial empire turned to ash right in front of his eyes. But the absolute most satisfying, beautiful karma was yet to unfold right along the borderline. Because the federal court permanently revoked the chemical plant's environmental operating permits, the global investors and international trading partners of Sterling Biochem panicked, pulling out hundreds of millions of dollars in capital within a single week. With his massive facility completely locked down by federal marshals and his corporate bank account seized to pay Elena's $3 million judgment, Pierce's company plummeted straight into an irreversible bankruptcy. The proud, untouchable billionaire who wanted to rule the valley was forced to liquidate his personal luxury assets, hand over his corporate keys to a federal receiver, and watch his entire life's work get dismantled to pay off environmental fines. Exactly 3 days later, the ultimate day of sweet, satisfying justice arrived at the farm. Elena Rostova stood on her front porch, holding her daughter's hand and drinking a warm cup of tea, watching an incredible sight. A fleet of federal construction vehicles and heavy cranes rolled up to the borderline. They hooked massive steel cables to Pierce's $1 million spike fence. And panel by panel, the towering, toxic steel wall was ripped out of the ground, crushed into scrap metal, and hauled away in giant dump trucks. As the final steel panel fell to the ground with a massive thud, the bright, glorious morning sunlight flooded back across Elena's berry fields for the first time in months. The fresh mountain breeze rushed through the valley, the natural underground streams began to clear, and a small herd of mountain deer was seen peacefully crossing the open boundary line once again. Today, if you drive through Green Valley, the multi-million-dollar chemical plant next door is nothing but an empty, silent ghost town, surrounded by rusted chains and federal seizure signs. A massive, worthless monument to an ego that thought it was above the law. But right next to it, the sun shines brilliantly on Elena Rostova's thriving organic farm. The soil has been completely bioremediated and restored to perfect purity. Her organic certification has been fully reinstated, and her crops are blooming bigger and healthier than ever before. Elena won her sanctuary back, proving to every corrupt corporate bully in the world that no matter how many millions you spend to build a wall of malice, you can never build a fence high enough to escape the devastating karma of true federal justice. If you believe Pierce Sterling got exactly what he deserved, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel right now, and let us know in the comments below. What would you do if a corrupt corporate billionaire built a toxic steel wall on your property line? Thank you so much for watching today's video, and we will see you next time on another intense and deeply satisfying episode of Fence Line Feuds.